Our story begins in 1991 in the battlefields of Iraq, where hundreds of thousands of American soldiers went to stop the incursion of Saddam Hussein into Kuwait and other territories. But that is not the real story. Our story is about a different set of battles. The battle to stop the legacy of government abuse and neglect of our own vets. Vets who went into battle completely healthy, but returned home with debilitating illnesses. These were collectively called Gulf War syndrome. But the Pentagon, the Defense Department, the Veterans Administration, and the White House have continued to this day to refuse to acknowledge the legitimacy of these hundreds of thousands of illnesses and tens of thousands of deaths. What were the causes? We will explore. Chemical and biological weapons that we were told did not exist, but indeed we will prove did. Vaccines that were experimental and should never have been approved for human use, but were. Depleted uranium that now permeates every single square inch of the Middle East battlefields and will for thousands of years, yet we were told was harmless. It is not. We will speak with the people, physicians, scientists, military personnel, people inside the Pentagon and Defense Department, whistleblowers going on the record for the first time. But that is only half of this program. In a little unusual way, we have decided to do this second part of this story, intentionally filming it as raw as possible, meaning we wish to capture the raw emotions that I saw and felt when I interviewed hundreds of homeless vets, with no special effects or B-roll or music or anything else that would take attention away from or diminish the powerful experience you're about to see. Hence, this program is in 2 stages. There are almost 1 million homeless vets. They are at high risk of alcoholism, as you will see, drug addiction, violence, post-traumatic stress disorder, and are frequently unable to emotionally regain their previous life with their family or their employers. The government has turned its back on them. The American public is simply not aware of their plight. Therefore, we want to show you what happens when a person suffers post-traumatic stress disorder, Gulf War syndrome, anxiety, depression, then becomes addicted and has to live either in the streets or the woods. We chose to focus on one area of the country, a large concentration of homeless vets in Titusville, Florida. Large amounts of vets living in the woods, discarded and abused by community, public officials, and police. Vets who are constantly harassed and ticketed for sitting in public parks or simply walking down a street. We also chose this area because of a unique hero who is the only reason many of these vets are able to survive at all. A former homeless veteran of Vietnam, George Taylor, who is committing his life and making it his mission to make sure that no vet is ever forgotten or discarded. Join us now as we begin our journey, American Veterans, Discarded and Forgotten.
After the first Gulf War, thousands of American soldiers returned from Iraq complaining of a variety of troubling symptoms that collectively came to be known as Gulf War syndrome.
What is causing these problems? Well, we only know that it's called Gulf War syndrome and that it's more complicated than what the mainstream press is reporting.
The Pentagon refused our interview requests and also refused to answer our written questions.
Within a couple of days of getting there, everybody was sick. We had nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, sometimes all at the same time. Sometimes, some people threw up. I mean, it was like 90% of my unit.
Originally, my symptoms was respiratory distress, diarrhea, and unsteadiness. But as a female vet, I did not want to go to sick call and look weaker, which is a stigma in the military.
I came down with severe body pains all throughout my body, and I never had anything like that in my life. And I'd always been in excellent health prior to that.
My legs were getting infections The skin on my feet and in my toes, they were cracking and bleeding. Now, I feel tired all the time and I don't sleep.
My tongue and my gums split and they started bleeding real bad. It was almost instantaneous.
Fatigue, rashes, itching. I was really actually healthy before I went, and I just had a recent physical.
I started having a lot of panic attacks. I lost a lot of weight, blood pressure. I got nervous when I got around people, got real shaky.
I started to have all kinds of weird problems, and they can't seem to give me a direct answer on what my problem is.
I served in the first Gulf War, and then went on later in the last 3 years of my career to serve in the office of the Secretary of Defense, working in the department that was researching and putting out information on Gulf War illnesses. The department from the beginning embarked on a public relations campaign to confound and confuse scientists, veterans, Congress, and the public at large. There was actually a battle plan, a document that was the guiding principle for this public relations effort, and it was called Bronze Anvil. Bronze Anvil is a public relations campaign designed to confuse scientists, to change the focus, to make everyone think that veterans were ill because of stress. And the first thing they did was they called it Gulf War Syndrome.
Our top story tonight concerns Gulf War Syndrome, a sickness affecting thousands of Gulf War veterans that is yet to be explained by medical experts.
And that's confusing to scientists because a syndrome is a set of diagnosed problems that leads to a disease process. And that is not what has happened to Gulf War veterans. But initially, just that word alone, Gulf War Syndrome, made it invalid in many scientists' mind that there was a real problem. The Office of the Special Assistant for Gulf War Illnesses hired public relations specialists to craft this policy and use it to conduct its outreach. And some of the things they did was they would hold town hall meetings in such a way, knowing that the veterans were angry and knowing that the veterans didn't have real answers yet from the government, they would hold these meetings in such a way to overload them with information, to make them feel as if the government was really looking.
We have reason to believe that some of these illnesses may be the result of exposure to chemical and biological agents in that region. This contamination could have occurred in several ways, either through direct exposure from chemical or mixed agent weapons, or from the fallout as Allied forces bombed Iraqi chemical and biological weapons plants, throwing hazardous debris up into the weather fronts, which continuously moved down over our troops.
Deputy Defense Secretary John White told the Presidential Advisory Committee on Gulf War-related illnesses that U.S. troops destroyed Iraqi rockets, which contained nerve agents.
Were biological weapons used by Saddam Hussein during the Gulf War? The Pentagon won't tell, but some veterans say otherwise.
We were led to believe that our soldiers in the first Gulf conflict were not exposed to biological weapons by Iraq. What is the truth? Is it possible that many of those weapons of mass destruction, the chemical and biological agents, actually caused Gulf War Syndrome?
When the helicopters flew over the base, the Apaches and the Cobras, there was a stench that blew up from the sand, and we never figured out what it was. But I got a bunch of sores from that on my skin, my feet, for months on end.
As the units from the 82nd Airborne began to roll across Iraq and see all of these known chemical weapons storage sites, they weren't told that they were chemical weapons storage sites. They were just told they were ammunition depots. Even though CENTCOM, General Schwarzkopf's staff, had knowledge that some of those places were known storage facilities.
Now, how did we know that? Well, we had human spies that were basically passing that kind of information. So that was one of the major indicators that we had that the weapons were actually forward deployed.
And they blew up those depots.
It is now known and proven that the destruction by the Allies of nerve, chemical, and biological agents during the first Gulf War exposed our GIs to these dangerous elements. Could this have caused Gulf War syndrome?
We contaminated everybody in theater to some extent or another.
We used protective overgarments, boots, masks. I don't think you have seen a single battle scene from the Desert Storm War where our troops were not in MOPP gear.
DOD knew all the way back to 1988 with this report that dusty agents would penetrate our chemical suits in such profusion under such low wind conditions as to make our chemical suits totally and utterly useless. They still deployed us with this equipment. That, to me, is criminal negligence.
They were not prepared. They had no chemical suits that were acceptable for that area, or for chemicals or biologicals. In fact, later on, Isratex, the company that provided 800,000 of those chemical suits, was found to have provided defective suits.
Once the cat was out of the bag, the policymakers decided that the best way to say that nothing had happened to soldiers was to develop a computer model. And in their first model run, they said potentially 50 people may have been exposed. They went back and then they came back several months later and said maybe 500 people had been exposed.
Then they increased it to over 1,000, then 5,000, and then around 10,000, then around 20,000. It kept growing and growing. And now they're acknowledging 100,000 plus of our troops were exposed to that kind of exposure.
A top scientist at the Veterans Administration said today that soldiers face no greater long-term risk than would a factory worker in a chemical plant.
We feel that these are levels that are very near what people would be exposed to occupationally without having ill effects.
We've had a couple chemical alarm scares where we've had to put on our mask and our full chemical suit, and they all happen to be false alarms. There's little trace chemical in the air, but we think it's because the plants have been blown up in Iraq and the air is filtering this way. They say it's not enough to hurt you, though.
There is evidence that there were 14,000 chemical alarms that went off during the first Gulf War, all of which were ruled as negative by the Department of Defense. We know from the troops that were there that there were in fact positive alarms or positive findings. We know that the Fox vehicles, which are especially utilized for this purpose, found the traces of chemicals. Unfortunately, much of that information was lost as it was taken from them so that there would be no evidence that there were positive findings. We know in General Schwarzkopf's logs, his own personal CENTCOM logs, there is evidence there, and we have copies of 3 of those showing that there were in fact chemicals in the battlefield area. The Department of Defense, the CIA, the Veterans Administration, and the White House all had to conspire together to withhold this information. To keep the public from understanding that there was a real illness, Gulf War illness, they utilized places like Rand Corporation, or they utilized the Institute of Medicine, NIH. They would get these agencies to issue reports that, well, we can't figure it out, we don't see any problem here, and therefore they must be fine. And then the VA cannot treat for anything that does not exist. Most of the troops that placed Gulf War illness on their compensation or disability paperwork were turned down immediately.
Stress alone can produce a lot of the symptoms that the vets are having, and that doesn't mean that it's imaginary in their head. It's stress having a physiological and physical effect on their body.
Dr. Michael Kilpatrick of the Department of Defense insists that stress is still a factor in the veterans' illnesses.
We still don't have a test that says, yes, this exposure causes this brain damage.
Then we got reports how many of them had gone forward to the medics and complained about being sick during the war, and yet none of those records were available. So all of those records were sanitized. In fact, I even got a memo that all information regarding those who had been in for treatment or attempted to get some treatment during the Gulf War, those records should be removed.
After the first Gulf War conflict in 1991, the government, particularly the VA, was pushing the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder for armed forces personnel that were becoming sick. At the time, we knew that this couldn't be the reason because of the multiple signs and symptoms that are totally unrelated to post-traumatic stress disorder. Also, many of the medical problems, not psychological problems, that these Gulf War veterans had. So we knew it didn't fit.
I don't think you can possibly pass off the fact that a soldier has a deformed child to post-traumatic stress. Someone getting Hodgkin's disease, kidney failure, or having their children born with no limbs cannot possibly be viewed as a psychological problem.
We need much more candor from the DOD and the VA and the CIA. This may sound a bit harsh, but some heads need to roll, because I really believe that all three, to various degrees, have participated in a cover-up. We're at that point now where it's almost criminal, the lack of cooperation we've received from various government agencies.
Clearly something happened. And to see, in essence, the stonewalling by both the CIA as well as the Pentagon, we can't let them just sweep this thing under the rug.
At the end of my career in the military, in this office, I had the opportunity to get promoted, and I was so disturbed that my legacy had been that I had served in Special Forces units and Ranger operations, but then I get into this unit and it's designed to screw over the veteran. And that was the last place that I worked. And I was so disturbed that I didn't want them to touch the rank that I was going to receive and pin it on my shoulders, because some of the people there were not honorable people. The leaders at the top of this organization, they purposely set out to manipulate science and to steer science away from looking at the real exposures.
There are a number of documents that prove that the Department of Defense failed to disclose the truth about what happened during the Gulf War. They know what's going on, but they don't want the American public to know what's happening. Senator Don Regal made a statement in one of the Senate reports that states, yes, there's a mental problem, all right, but it's over at the Department of Defense. The chemical weapons were seen at Camisea. They knew full well the countries that had transferred these biological and chemical agents. Our troops saw them over there. They knew the coloration of those weapons. They identified those weapons. And yet you have General Schwarzkopf and Powell doing everything they can to cover up the information that would have saved the lives of many of these troops. There's no question about depleted uranium. The amount, I don't think we will ever know. However, those troops are now exposed and have become ill as a result of it. And we know that there are thousands and thousands of troops that have lung disorders and kidney disorders as a result of the delayed reaction to the radiation. Depleted uranium, which is really not depleted, is in fact a weapon of mass destruction.
The use of uranium munitions and the destruction of the Iraqi's infrastructure has turned Iraq into a radiological and chemically toxic nightmare for eternity.
What is depleted uranium? How does it manifest itself, and what danger is it? The Pentagon says, no problem. Depleted uranium, it's safe. The GIs say, not true. Depleted uranium is a causative factor in what is called Gulf War syndrome.
Depleted uranium, it's a very dense, heavy metal, and it's able to penetrate the most armor of any type of material used. It is a very minor amount of radioactivity, but it's not anything that, as long as it's in its bullet form, it can be stored, and it's not any type of hazardous material. Once it hits a vehicle, and vaporizes, then it becomes more of a hazardous material.
It is used in the 30mm shell, 50mm shell, bunker buster bombs, cruise missiles. Depleted uranium is everywhere. It is twice as dense as lead. It goes through a tank like butter. And it is very effective, which is why it's used.
Uranium is abundant in the crust of the Earth. Depleted uranium is abundant as the waste product of the enrichment of uranium. Uranium, whether depleted, natural, or enriched, all of them are emitters of alpha particles. When it ignites, it releases atomic particles of depleted uranium, and they are baked by the high temperature to the invisible particles of dust that are suspended in the atmosphere all the time. Now, in those dust particles, which are permanently suspended, permanently inhaled and exhaled, uranium isotopes are present. Depleted uranium enters the body and gets lodged in the lymph nodes.
And the cells around this particle will get a very high radiation dose. And because of this high radiation dose, those cells can mutate. And if they mutate, then they can go on to form cancer. Uranium binds very strongly to DNA.
A recent study by the National Academy of Sciences called the BEAR-7 report, The Biological Effects of Ionizing Radiation, shows that there is no dose of radiation that is safe. The uranium can be then translocated by white blood cells to the lymph glands in the chest, where it can cause lymphomas. It also is translocated to the bone, where it can cause bone cancer or leukemia. It's excreted through the kidney, where in high doses it can cause acute nephritis, but it also can cause kidney cancer. It's excreted in the semen, and in that form it can mutate the genes in the sperm to damage the developing embryo.
How could you use hundreds of tons of depleted uranium over Iraq knowing that its half-life is 4.5 billion years?
The people of Iraq have the same illnesses and sicknesses and conditions that our own soldiers have. When you also add the dimension that depleted uranium weapons are considered illegal under international law analysis, Americans have to confront the fact we are killing countless of innocent civilians.
The dust storms which occur frequently, sandstorms in that area of the world, blow the stuff up and people inhale it. My colleagues in Basra noticed an increased incidence of childhood cancer. Why children? Because they're very sensitive to radiation, 10 to 20 times more sensitive and susceptible to getting cancer from radiation than adults. The incidence of childhood cancer in Basra now has gone up 700% or 7 times. We've never seen this in medicine before. And the incidence of severe congenital anomalies, babies being born with no brains or single eyes or no arms, has also gone up 700%. So women are too terrified to deliver their babies.
Well, now my son was born with a birth defect as a result of the war. Now he's had cleft lip and palate. He's had 3 surgeries. He needs at least 2 more. VA is not covering any of that. They've denied all of our benefits. He has speech therapy. He has tubes in his ears. He's had constant ear infections, so now he has hearing loss in one side. He has no father. He died when he was 2. He was not pleased that we were going to have another baby. He was afraid of what he was exposed to. I didn't share that concern at that time. I was just thrilled. And then my son was born, and my husband carried the guilt of that child until he died. He carried that guilt with him. He always blamed himself for it.
I am really dreadfully afraid to try and conceive and carry a child. I am just looking at my hair and my memory and my skin and things like that. I can't imagine what's happening on the inside of me and what may have happened to that very fragile genetic material that's in the ovaries. It scares me to death to try and think about carrying a child.
Read the statistics of American soldiers and unusual cancers. Then you look at the statistics of many, many other illnesses and conditions, and you say, no, wait a minute, this is inhumane. This weapon is making people sick who aren't even soldiers.
The epidemiological evidence for the health effects of uranium are very confused, very confused. And the reason for this is that the people who do these sorts of studies are usually people who are funded by the military, and so there haven't been a lot of official or even dare I say it, very good epidemiological studies of Gulf War veterans.
Now, the problem with the second Gulf War is we're finding that they're much sicker, much faster. They're returning and they're getting the blind eye from the Pentagon a lot sooner and being ruled PTSD, medicated with psychotropic drugs, and sent back out to the streets. And our concern is that the number of homicides and suicides that we're seeing in the military right now are a direct result of the neurotoxic effects from the depleted uranium.
I was with the tank battalion. Tanks are armored with depleted uranium, and the ammunition is depleted uranium. I was around it a lot. I actually asked my doctor, because I was a hospital corpsman, so I asked the medical officer that was with us, and what he told us about depleted uranium is it was completely safe, that we would have to virtually eat it in order for there to be any kind of problems. I've since learned that that was an outright lie.
The leaders haven't told the soldiers, the commanders haven't told the soldiers, the leaders and the commanders are not complying with their own requirements. And the Department of Defense leaders have done everything they can to prevent that information from getting out. It's real simple. If we told the soldiers how hazardous uranium munitions use is, told them about the serious adverse health and environmental effects and what's really happened, they'd never use them. They'd never go near it. And the U.S. would be forced to stop it, and we would no longer thoroughly contaminate the earth. It's real simple. Inform the soldier. Tell them the risks. And when you send them to combat and they get exposed and they get sick, you provide prompt and effective medical care. And don't argue and don't debate with them. Don't destroy the records. Don't destroy the medical records. Don't destroy the personnel records as occurring in St. Louis, Missouri, the National Records Center. Tell the truth. Take care of the American warrior. They've earned it.
I examined 24 veterans which just returned from the Persian Gulf. Just as a matter of curiosity, I took the urine samples of those patients and sent them to a radiochemistry laboratory of the United States Army in the Aberdeen, Maryland. I waited for 3 months. They never contacted me. So one day I went on the telephone and spoke with the head of that laboratory, and he claimed he never received my samples. So I went down to uranium registry, and we traced through the US mail that samples were actually sent and delivered to a radiochemistry lab in Aberdeen. I contacted them again. Samples were discovered on some shelf in the basement. They were analyzed, but they were all negative. So I said, fair enough. I will analyze them at some other place. Then hospital management came to me, including chief of staff and hospital director, suggesting that I do not do these studies because it would be futile work. And I said, I don't think so, because my professional judgment suggests that there could be radioactive contamination of soldiers who present with this strange wasting disease with the symptoms that were totally non-specific. So I took those samples of urine and sent them to the different lab, an eminent laboratory in Canada at Memorial University in Newfoundland, where we analyzed those samples, and 67% were positive. I wrote a letter to President Bill Clinton in mid-90s when I was harassed by the Veterans Administration to stop my work. And in my letter, I said in one sentence, I have been delegated by the government of the United States to take care of the sick veterans in my department. And disappearing samples, destroyed records, and so on, really point to nothing else than conspiracy against the veterans of the United States. President Bill Clinton received my letter, and he appointed a commission to investigate my charges. And it went to the repository of the government bureaucracy with nothing much coming out of it, except for RAND reports, 2 huge books, which made the statement that there is no risk and danger from depleted uranium.
One thing that the Department of Defense is trying to prevent is from the American public and all the citizens of the world, and also the residents of these nations, from knowing exactly what the true casualty count is. If the American public sees these documents, which should be readily available on different websites, and they find out what the true casualties are, what the true cost of war is, then they would be in a total uproar, and we would see an immediate cessation to the use of uranium munitions. General Erich Shinseki, when he was the Chief of Staff for the U.S. Army, had issued all the orders mandating thorough and prompt medical care for all exposed individuals. He had issued the direct orders himself, ordering thorough, prompt environmental remediation. He had issued the orders himself, mandating thorough training for all individuals. This has not occurred. General Shinseki's initial order was from August of 1993. So it's always been known.
How is it possible that a person who never went to the Gulf now suffers from Gulf War syndrome? Lots of GIs are now sick, but a lot of them were stateside. What did they all have in common, those that went and those that did not? Botulism and anthrax vaccines. Let's explore the role that vaccines have in Gulf War syndrome.
Because of the potential anthrax threat, last year the Defense Department ordered vaccinations, and one of the first in line was Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, Eric Benken. Despite isolated protests, the vast majority of medical experts endorsed the vaccine's use. And despite charges that the so-called Gulf War syndrome and anthrax are connected, Huxell says that's just not true. The Defense Department continues to stress the safety of the anthrax vaccine, and all troops headed for the Persian Gulf receive the inoculation series.
During the Gulf War, I was a shot team, or a vaccination team. My shot team gave out 75,000 injections in a 2-week period. So needless to say, my thumb had a blister on it.
I was exposed to numerous vaccinations. I can't even tell you how many, because they just lined us up and we would do like 3 or 4 shots in one station and more shots in the next station. My left leg began to swell, especially my ankle. I've always been very athletic, kickboxing, yoga, everything. And one morning I woke up and my ankle was enormous. I couldn't get my jeans on or off because my calf was so swollen. I had felt tingling in my ankle before it started, but I, thought it was nothing. And when I woke up in the morning, it was huge. I deal with a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment because I hate feeling or thinking I'm less than. And I really feel that way with my leg. It's been really hard to deal with that. So I have to maneuver to hide it when I can, but I don't have any answers for anyone who asks me what's wrong with my leg. I'm young. There shouldn't be anything wrong with me.
I woke up one morning and these knuckles in my hand were like golf balls, and I just kind of blew it off. Maybe I injured something or an old injury, and about 2 days later I woke up and my feet were swollen like elephantitis. Purple, I couldn't walk on them. They were very tingly and sensitive, so I would have to crawl.
There are a lot of people in the alternative medical community, including well-educated MDs, who feel that there have been no significant long-term studies of the effects of vaccination, and that to a very great extent there is a myopia on the part of the medical community not looking at long-term harm that vaccines cause.
The toxins that are in vaccines include mercury, aluminum, and squalene. Squalene is an oil distantly related to cholesterol that has a very interesting effect when it goes into the human body in the form of an injection. Patients who've received the squalene anthrax vaccine have ended up with illnesses like multiple sclerosis and systemic lupus erythematosus and bronchial asthma and psoriasis, and the whole rash of autoimmune diseases can be brought on in these military persons who served in the Gulf War.
I served in Iraq, and we received inoculations that we were told we weren't able to know what they were. And I had an adverse reaction right there on the border of Syria and Turkey, where my lungs started to fill with fluid. And for about 2 weeks, I was pretty sick.
I believe that I was compromised by having too many shots, or as us in the military call it, gang vaccines. I don't believe that having 6 vaccines in one day strengthens the human body. I think it weakens it.
I took a series of 3 shots of anthrax, and that basically was a turning point of my, I think, problems.
One reason why I decided to get out of the military, because I did not want to be put in a position where I had to tell people that you have to take these shots, that you have to take these drugs, and then you end up getting sick, and I have to live with that feeling. Because I know what I lived, I know what others have lived that I've talked with and been around with all these years, and I didn't want to deal with that.
You've got people chronically disabled. As long as they're alive, they're going to be liabilities for the American government to take care of. So admitting that the vaccines were a contributing factor in a lot of this illness would be a financial burden for the U.S. government.
They wanted to implement West Nile vaccine when in reality, we didn't even have West Nile in this country. But the United States government, with the approval of the CDC and the Department of Commerce, sold West Nile fever virus to Iraq. And we've got the documents proving that, along with the batch number and the date where the West Nile was sold.
Researchers say they have isolated an unusual microorganism in the blood of sick veterans, one they think was genetically altered as though it were designed for germ warfare.
Much of their research has pointed to a very small, little understood type of bacteria called mycoplasma.
You've tested hundreds and hundreds of different individuals.
We've tested hundreds of individuals, that's correct.
Many, what's the percentage that you found were infected with this bacteria?
About 45%.
4 different approaches to the Pentagon, including Colin Powell, failed. All interviews were ultimately denied. Why the reluctance to talk about this?
Something needs to be done before my wife dies, before I die, or any other Gulf War vets die.
Some are claiming that they were human guinea pigs and that historically the military has used our GIs for their experiments. Could this be why our troops are suffering from Gulf War syndrome? Dr. Garth Nicholson, a highly respected scientist, claims that our GIs were exposed to a genetically modified mycoplasm which could have caused Gulf War syndrome.
Well, we know that the military has been involved in testing of biologic agents, and in fact we think that the mycoplasma is an incapacitating biologic agent, not designed to immediately kill people, but designed to render them ill. And one of the things that we've felt all along is that this is one big test, one big scientific experiment to see the results of a weaponized mycoplasma, a weaponized incapacitating biological warfare agent on large numbers of people. We know that experiments were conducted in the Texas Department of Corrections. These were experiments that were done under the supervision of the Army and people that work for the Army. These experiments were done on prisoners without full informed consent. Many prisoners died. We somehow got involved in it because the prison guards were getting sick, because these are slowly transmittable infections, they're airborne infections. And they were coming to us for help because they had the same signs and symptoms as the Gulf War veterans.
There's a Senate report 103-97 that states, during the past 50 years, Hundreds of thousands of our military have been experimented upon without their knowledge or consent. This report, which was really never supposed to see public distribution, mentions Operation Whitecoat, the use of a drug called BZ, the use of atomic veterans to stand and face the atomic blast. We have no idea how many experiments have gone on. We need to have guarantees that when you go into the military, you will not be experimented upon without your consent. Now, as a nurse, I thought I would be aware of this. I thought I would be more conscious of what I was being given, but yet many times the bottles were not labeled, or you weren't told, or it was none of your business, and that has to stop.
As for the U.S. Army, we requested all the documents they had on these experiments back in September. At this time, they're still searching.
The U.S. Army has done most of the research on Mycoplasma fermentans. The incognita strain we feel is a weaponized mycoplasma. It has some unusual gene sequences in it that would only be there if one were weaponizing this particular microbe. That is making it more resistant to a hostile environment, less sensitive, for example, to drying or to extreme heat, more pathogenic, more able to invade cells, and more able to suppress the immune system. All of these characteristics are found in this unusual strain of mycoplasma that we found in the Gulf War veterans.
The mysterious mix of symptoms, which includes chronic fatigue, headaches, rashes, and joint pain. This bacterium, Mycoplasma fermentans incognitus, may cause it.
One of the interesting aspects, and actually horrifying aspects, of the Gulf War conflict is that when the veterans came back and became ill, many started showing autoimmune and neurological signs and symptoms, and one would not expect this at all from the types of exposures that they were received or exposed to in the Gulf. We have found that there are certain infections that are found in the Gulf War veterans that are often associated with these disorders, such as mycoplasmal infections that we found associated with multiple sclerosis, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or Lou Gehrig's disease, and other autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid arthritis and so on. And these infections were found in a very high percentage of Gulf War veterans. In our studies, approximately 40 to 45% of the Gulf War veterans who became sick after the war had this one type of infection, a mycoplasmal infection.
After I got back, I went to the blood bank to donate blood. I was told, oh, you're a Gulf War vet, you can't donate blood. I said, why? Well, we just got word that you can't. I find that a little disturbing.
The Centers for Disease Control says it is not aware of any scientific evidence to suggest that illnesses among Gulf War veterans are caused by infectious agents.
Now, we know that some of the vaccines were contaminated. In fact, there's a study that was done by the VA in San Diego that showed that some of the military vaccines were contaminated with mycoplasma. One of the properties of these infections is that they do invade into the central nervous system, and they can invade nerve cells and cause brain swelling and characteristics which can cause brain image changes that are seen in these veterans. And if they're not treated in a timely manner, it's too late. Most of these people will have irreversible brain damage and eventually die of their infections and the resulting diseases.
Based on any number of studies, we're very confident that these patients are infected with a stealth adapted virus.
How is it possible that some GIs ended up having this very bizarre mycoplasma? How did they get it in their bodies?
My accumulated evidence as a researcher is now indicating that this may in fact have been an experiment wherein many troops were vaccinated with an experimental vaccine.
One issue that has not been addressed by the mainstream media. Have the military, the Defense Department, the CIA, and others used our soldiers as human guinea pigs?
Well, one of the interesting aspects of this whole story is the fact that the government, at least pathologists that work for the government, that work for the U.S. Army, actually hold the patents on the type of mycoplasma that we found. And this may be one reason why they're denying that this mycoplasma is involved in these illnesses. Ordinarily, these types of contaminations wouldn't cause a problem because they're very minor contaminants. except when someone is immunosuppressed. And one becomes immunosuppressed because of the chemicals, because of the multiple vaccinations that were given in a very short period of time. Because of we feel the immune suppression, these minor infections became major infections. And this is what we think is causing the illness in the families. We found that it slowly spread to immediate family members, and the adults in the families would come down with fibromyalgia syndrome or chronic fatigue syndrome, but the children, very interestingly, were most often diagnosed with autistic spectrum disorders, such as autism, Asperger's disease, and so on. And so wherever we see family members getting sick, we know that can't be post-traumatic stress disorder, because you can't pass or transfer post-traumatic stress disorder.
I've talked to thousands of them. I've met with them around the country. I've seen their scars, their emotional scars and their physical scars. I've seen the families that have been destroyed. They ask only that they be compensated and have some form of treatment to make their lives better. I am a nurse. I served as a flight nurse, and I served proudly. And I loved every minute of being in support of Operation Desert Storm. There is a flight nurse's creed, and it's very important to me. I will summon every resource to prevent the triumph of death over life. This I will do. I will not falter in war or in peace. And that's why I'm doing what I am doing, is I want these troops to get the help that they so deserve.
What could have caused hundreds of thousands of GIs who fought in the first Gulf War to be suffering with so many debilitating conditions? And then you have about another 150,000 suffering from the second Gulf conflict.
I think it's a combination of about 4 or 5 different things that they were exposed to.
Well, many believe that they were exposed to experimental vaccines, and these experimental vaccines included botulism and anthrax. Also, they were used as human guinea pigs. They were injected with a genetically engineered mycoplasma. They were also exposed to depleted uranium, which even to this day the government claims is not a problem. We've been told that there were no biological weapons, no nerve gas, no chemical weapons, yet there's abundant evidence to the contrary. Why couldn't the Pentagon, the Defense Department, and the White House just be honest and let the soldiers know what potential risks were involved?
I think as most veterans, as we look around at what has happened throughout the years to veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War I, that nothing comes forward without squeezing and asking DOD, is this real? Did this happen?
One troop told me that he had been to the VA numerous times to get help. He was losing the feeling in his legs. And finally, he called me one day and he said, "Joyce, I'm going to the VA. This is the last time." He said, "I'm in a wheelchair now. My wife is going to take me. My wife and my 2 kids are going to go over there, and we're going to try for the very last time to try and get some help." When he went to the VA, and he called me later that night to tell me what had happened, they told him, and then took his wife aside and said, "We did a psychological evaluation on your husband, and we found that he's really a latent homosexual." And that just enraged his wife so much. They literally had to remove her from the VA. She said, "How dare you say that in front of my husband, in front of my 2 children here? You know that's not the truth." But they would do anything, absolutely anything, to keep it off an objective physical finding. They used subjective and said, "Well, you're just imagining it," or "You've got some type of psychosomatic reaction, you want to be sick, or you're just trying to get compensation."
They pushed the Gulf War vets into PTSD. It was not PTSD. It was physiological damage by the exposure agents that we had. If you push us off on post-traumatic stress, it costs them less money. They don't have to do all those heavy-duty diagnostic tests that you would have to for the physical damage.
It puts the onus back on the veterans themselves in a way, instead of on these toxic exposures. I think that this is absolutely disgusting, to try and blame the veterans themselves for their illnesses.
If 80,000 contaminated U.S. soldiers from the Gulf War I are granted some kind of monetary compensation, we are talking about billions upon billions of dollars, which nobody can afford. Nobody wants to admit that they are doing indiscriminate damage to the soldiers and non-soldiers alike.
If the people in this country knew the truth behind this, it could bring down the government as we know it. That's how serious it is.
The magnitude of this is that we've had to go to the press. And we've even been shut down through the press. Early on, I was told, be careful what you say because we still need access to this active duty base. And if we have any trouble with the coverage that we're giving on this, then we'll have to shut it down.
The American media is supposed to be the guardian of our nation. They're supposed to identify the problems, they're supposed to report the problems, they're supposed to make Americans aware of the problems so that Americans can act. And that means contact members of Congress, contact members of the Department of Defense, contact the President and demand action, demand compliance with existing protocols, requirements, regulations, and orders and guidelines. They're not thoroughly reporting what has occurred. They're just not doing it, and for many reasons. Number one, the members of the Department of Defense and Administration, those leaders, exercise executive authority and they simply lie about what's been known. Or they exert tremendous pressure to include retaliation against anybody that speaks out. And then the other last part is the members of the media, those responsible as guardians of our nation, simply don't want to report the total failures by the leaders in the Department of Defense, and the Center for Disease Control, the National Academy of Sciences, Federal Drug Administration, or the VA, or the White House. They lose access, they lose everything if they tell the truth.
And the American people don't know about it because the New York Times wouldn't print the article I wrote about it, and the Pentagon is sitting on the information and won't allow it to be published.
Miss Clinton met with a few Gulf War vets, knew there was a problem. What did they do? They formed a Presidential Advisory Committee, and through the whole course of that, and even when it got extended 18 months, we were still battling with that committee to get to the truth. The people that were put on those committees were there to delay us, to deny us. When we had anybody that would listen, officially, whatever, we were there telling them, pleading with them, pushing them, trying to convince them, trying to show them facts and figures. They blew us off and proceeded on their pre-planned agenda.
It was a sham. It was a trail of tears that paraded around this country, yanking the hearts out of veterans, thinking that they were going to get some resolution to their problems. I saw these troops, many of them, give up their last dollar to be able to go and speak before the commission, to help them understand that they really were sick. They had no idea what was really going on. You could see that this was just simply a situation where they tried to placate the veterans, quiet them down. The goal was find out what all these troops know, find out what documents they have, what evidence they have, get them to turn it over so that there won't be enough evidence out there that they can expose what really took place during the Gulf War. And I've talked to many physicians in the military who've told me, yeah, we know there really is an illness, but we're not allowed to treat for it. One physician told me he left the military based on the fact that he basically watched a troop die that they did not want to admit to chemical exposure.
Ask your Gulf War vets if they've had MRI, RSs, or SPECT scans showing the damage in their brain that is physical. Have they had viral testing? Have they had the testing they needed to guide them to the treatment that they need desperately? No. They've let us medically deteriorate in front of them.
And there were many moves, many conferences held in Washington to which I was frequently invited, and the result of all of these conferences was just eating sandwiches and drinking coffee and collecting government's per diem money and going back to their workplaces accomplishing nothing.
There are a number of people that the veterans would like to see on the Hall of Shame. General Franks, Secretary of Defense William Cohen, Secretary of Defense William Perry, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, General Shelley Kashvili, General Schwarzkopf, General Colin Powell, Secretary of Defense Les Aspin, Secretary of Defense John Deutsch, Dr. Michael Kilpatrick, Dr. Winkenwerder, Dr. Stephen Joseph, who was really the first to be involved in the PTSD cover-up, Dr. Joyce Lashoff, who chaired the Presidential Advisory Commission, Lieutenant Colonel Vicki Merriman, Michael Fomento. He wasn't in the government, but he acted almost with them. He wrote Gulf War Syndrome. And I have to tell you, that is probably the hardest thing that ever happened for a Gulf War veteran, was to read how they were just making up the Gulf War illness. Michael Fomento did a tremendous disservice to the military, put more people, I think, on the verge of suicide than anyone ever did in that one article in Reason magazine.
We have attempted to get members within each administration to act, and we have failed. We have only a handful of members of Congress that have done anything to attempt to help us. Christopher Shays, Bernard Sanders, Jim McDermott, Dennis Kucinich. We only have a handful.
Representative Jack Metcalf was very interested in the subject, and he knew very well what was happening. I was told by his people who came to the meeting, Joyce, the representative knows that you're telling the truth, but he can't publicly support you, was the statement they gave to me. I said, I'm not concerned about supporting me. That's not the issue. I'm concerned about him doing something for the military.
They've been briefed, they have read the material, they're aware of the casualties, and they abandon the American warrior in a time of need. That's inexcusable. They have to remember, we don't work for them, they work for us. And they must be held accountable. All the way up to the President of the United States must fulfill his obligation to provide medical care to all of us.
And to believe that these guys are on TV giving 5-minute speeches on the Hill right now saying they support the troops. Where are they when you need them to sign on to bills and get bills through?
I sent those soldiers to the Persian Gulf. I voted to confront Saddam Hussein, get him out of Kuwait, not allow him to control nearly 50% of the world's oil, and amass an incredible military machine. I felt very right then when I voted to send our troops there, and I feel right now. But I have this aching heart that the soldiers I sent were not treated properly in terms of their potential exposure, and clearly not treated properly once they came home. And I have a hard time living with that.
I served proudly. I felt I was serving my country. I felt I was defending my country. I would fight for the American people. I would fight for the human rights. I would fight for freedom, but knowing what the Department of Defense has done to us.
I used to go into Dr. Kilpatrick's office within the Department of Defense, and I would sit down and try to pick his brain and ask him, why do you feel that veterans are complaining? And he would say, because they want money.
They can't work. They end up getting sicker. Their marriages take a hit. And they end up divorced. They end up homeless. And they're dying.
The Army provides some great medical benefits for you and your family. I know that I can go to sick hall or I can go to the doctor. Any kind of appointment that you would want to make on the civilian side, you can do that in the Army.
For all individuals that have been discharged from the Department of Defense, either in the U.S. Army Reserve, the National Guard, or in the active duty, over 205,000 as of Thanksgiving of 2006 have now gone to the VA as DNBI casualties seeking medical care, disease and non-battle injury. We're looking at 30 to 40% of all individuals becoming very ill and very sick.
There's no doubt that right now that the Gulf Wars collectively have killed half as many troops as were killed in Vietnam. I mean, we have right now on the doorsteps of the VA people begging to get in, begging for help, being turned away, suffering, and then committing suicide. We are seeing illnesses much faster at a much greater rate. We're going to have a figure that is so high, nobody's going to believe how many will be returning ill and how sick they will be from Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom.
We know very well that all of our soldiers go there to expose their life to the risk of being killed by the bullets and the roadside bombs. In addition to it, we are dealing with invisible enemy, which is suspended radiation in the air, which really our soldiers do not deserve to be additionally exposed to, and much less than the soldiers, civilians and children have even less culpability because they really don't know what they are dealing with.
When you raise your right hand and you swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, you make a bond with your government that you're willing to risk your limbs and your brain and your well-being to go sacrifice. And the unspoken commitment that every soldier believes, and I know I believed it, and I know every other soldier believed it, is that if you are injured, whether it be from a bullet, a bomb, a chemical warfare agent, a biological weapons release, a psychological injury, that your government will take care of you when you come home. And they will give you everything that they can to bring you back to that place that you were before you went to war and sustained that injury. But what you find out is your war's over. The next war's begun.
You need to hear the truth, and you're not going to hear it from congressmen, senators, your president, or your presidential candidates. You need to listen to your troops that lived through the battle.
Well, I think the best approach to solving this problem now is to acknowledge that the problem exists, to stop saying that this is all a psychological problem, like post-traumatic stress disorder, and to realize that many, if not the overwhelming majority of these veterans that are suffering with real medical reasons for their ailments, and to set up some kind of a systematic way to examine these veterans to determine what their exposures were, what types of toxic materials are still present in their bodies, whether these be biological, radiological, or chemical, and treat them.
Only a handful of us have been able to do that through benefactors, to get some real testing done, real diagnostic work, to show the effect on our own body. And then we turn around and try to fight to get those same tests done for others.
They have no fight left in them. It's now time that we take that fight and that we go forward, unfortunately in the memory of a lot of those troops.
Now that you've seen part one of their story, how they were completely healthy, got the vaccines, were exposed to depleted uranium or other biological agents, and then some combination of those ended up giving them Gulf War syndrome, and how a government conspired to deny them the ability to be treated and helped, and how that led to many of them becoming permanently disabled and even dying. Those numbers are shocking and disgraceful. Now we go to our second part. I've filmed all over the United States for this, but I found the most compelling arguments, the most graphic examples of what it is to be a forgotten and abandoned and homeless vet in Florida. We're going to visit a stand down. A stand down is where twice a year, a large group of former veterans from the Vietnam and even Korean wars get together and they try to help the veterans who are homeless. They give them boots and sleeping bags, canteens, some doctors give them exams, a couple lawyers try to give them some legal advice, and they get some food. And you'll see that they come a mile long waiting to get whatever they can. And this is their story. It's a little raw, it's very graphic, but I believe Americans need to see this. In any given year, between 300 and 800,000 American vets are homeless. I believe that it was important that we hear from them personally, their stories, and see the type of conditions they're existing in. Walking out here on this trail and seeing all these small camps, like this camp here, I couldn't believe that this is happening in the United States. This is something we would see in the third world. This is something we would expect in a refugee camp in Africa or Southeast Asia. And we're just a half a mile from suburban area here. What's your name?
Trainwreck.
Trainwreck. Trainwreck?
Mm-hmm.
How long you been out here?
I've been out here about 4 months.
What's your profession?
Scaffolding.
Scaffolding. That makes a pretty good living at that when you're working, right?
When there is work.
How long's it been since you've had work?
2.5 years. There's no work out there.
And then you heard about a place out here where people were just living in tents?
We had no choice, either that or sleep on the concrete.
Are you a vet?
Yes.
How's our government assisted you?
Well, you see it.
This is the help your government gives you.
This is it.
How many other vets have you met who are homeless?
A lot. There's a lot of vets out here. I mean, it's tough. I mean, you got to bring your own bottled water back here. And as far as electricity, you're lighting fires. And that's how you cook your food, you know.
About how many people live out here?
Well, that's a good guesstimation. I'd say a good 20 to 30. So
what's a message you'd like to tell the American public?
Hold on to what you got. Life sucks, deal with it.
What's it like for you living out here?
Not fun. I mean, from a daily to daily basis, I mean, you're struggling to make it.
Where do you take a shower?
Well, there's like a canal over here, but the one thing about it is there's an embankment, like 90 degrees down. You got to climb down it to get to the water.
To take a shower?
Yeah.
What message would you like to give the American public?
Well, my mayor's opinion, because I have met a lot of people over my years of being on the streets and going from place to place to place. There's so many people that look down their nose at us. Don't look down your nose, because you're only one paycheck away from being where we're at.
Give us your name, please.
My name is Mark.
Mark, tell us your story.
Well, about 3 years ago, I became homeless, and I've been camped in the woods now since about last October.
What kind of work did you do? What's your specialty?
I'm a carpenter. I build houses, and you know, not to pat myself on the back, but I'm good at it. But they're not building. And I blame it all on the greed. You know, they kept pushing to build, and now they're not building anywhere. They're not projected to build in this county for 4 or 5 years still.
Did you ever have a home?
Yes.
A family?
Yes.
Do you have a problem with alcohol or drugs?
No.
What percentage of the people out there are having problems with drugs or alcohol?
Well, I couldn't give you a percentage. I'll say many of them do.
Are they getting help?
No. They're pushed to the side. They keep circulating rumors that they're going to kick us all out of there real soon.
Where are you supposed to go if they kick you out?
They don't care.
Let's say that you could sit across from Barack Obama right now. What message would you give the president?
Well, I don't know if there's anything he could do, because it started, you know, long before him with all the greed. Everybody looking for me. And like out there in the camps, it's not like that. Everybody helps everybody else because you need that help. And I don't know that there's anything one man could do. You need to hold the whole philosophy of the country needs to change. People's attitudes.
Most people don't understand the psychology of a veteran. The issues of being traumatized by sustained death and dying.
We have 1,200 homeless veterans in Brevard County, estimated 4,200 in Central Florida and 17,000 in the state of Florida. 27% of our veterans today in Florida are Iraq, Afghan veterans. First of all, there is no work. So a veteran who comes out of the service, his first avenue is to find work, not to reveal his issues. It's a very long period before that veteran even tries to get into VA or even realizes that he might have an issue related to the VA. So he tries to do it on his own and go through work, and if he's not successful at that, he can't get rental. We're short on housing, we're short on apartments. So in our area, they end up in the woods, still seeking work.
This is where I live here.
Is this your house or home?
This is my home.
When you get out of the military, it's like stepping off a cliff. You're stepping into civilian society. It's not an easy adjustment.
I have a gas stove that I use common fuel in. Camp fuel. It goes in here.
How often do you cook for yourself?
Every day.
Every day.
They start reaching out for help, and then they run into stumbling blocks. He gets profiled, first of all. It's not illegal to be homeless, but it's illegal to be homeless instead in some of our parks and recreation.
It's a bureaucratic conundrum to try to negotiate all the services that the veterans are entitled to, in fact, that they've earned. And many vets choose to live in the woods because that's where they've been. They've been in the field, and that's a more comfortable environment. I know it was for me. I felt much safer when I was on my own out in the jungle when I was in Vietnam.
Looks like you keep yourself neat and clean.
I do. I stay clean. I keep nice clothes. I got bathing stuff all in there.
You go to the beach each day to take a shower?
I go to the beach side. I go off of A1A, and I take a shower at Canoco Beach. I take my shower there, and they got bathroom facilities there.
You told me you got 2 tickets because you had a little sign saying that you're homeless?
I was flying a sign homeless in the sheriff's department, and I owe $104 for that.
So they gave a $100 ticket to a person who's homeless. Jesus.
If you are a homeless veteran, you go into Parks and Recreation, you are also arrested and pink slipped that you're not allowed to be in Parks and Recreation. So that's just another spiraling effect. When they get that ticket and they have no funding, then every time the police officer sees them again, they get a compound ticket. Now there's a capus for his arrest because he only had so many days to pay this $30, $40 ticket. So it's another spiraling effect. So and it doesn't end there because he gets hungry.
For the homeless vet, many of them also have an addiction to alcohol. And a lot of that comes from frustration. A lot of it comes from hopelessness. A lot of it comes from a need to just get from today till tomorrow. They're used to being able to do things on their own and take care of themselves. But now it's difficult suddenly to find a job, and that's new to them.
The drug and alcohol with the mental illness gets greater. The facilities that are available due to short funding also get shorter. So it just gets to the point to where there's no place to turn except back to the veterans trained survival, whatever it takes to survive.
Right now my main concern is I just got released from hospital because
I had a heart attack, and it was my third one. I had 2 stents placed in, and I'm busy now trying to get my. They told me I need to get a room for ACE with some AC in it at least for 2 or 3 days and get my prescription filled. I got 4 different medications on that, and I really don't know how to go around and get assistance.
How old are you?
55.
55 with 3 heart attacks and homeless, but my impression is, and if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong, that it looks like you're trying to make the best of the situation you can.
Yes, I am. I'm just trying to survive. I go to the labor hall down there at Workers every morning at 4 o'clock.
So 4 a.m. you go to the labor hall?
But I need a Florida identification. I have a Mississippi ID, and they won't accept that.
So you're trying to look for work. Every day you go at 4 o'clock, and you can't find work.
Right, and I can't come up to $25 that I need to get a Florida ID. I got documentation, I got my Social Security, my birth, but I don't have the $25 to get that with.
How long has it been since you've worked?
Since I've worked a regular job, probably about 2 years. Nobody really knows, that really understands how many vets are out here in the woods.
What's it like? Had you ever been homeless in the woods before?
Yeah.
But what's it like for someone who's just coming to that for the first time?
They're totally lost. I've had a couple people that I brought out to my camp just to give them a hand, because I see a lot of people that never even thought about being homeless in their life. And then all of a sudden they're there and they don't have a clue. I mean, being ex-military, we at least know a little bit about survival. But other people, they're totally lost.
It's really a kind of a hard day-to-day existence, more or less. For me, it's not really living per se, it's just existing day-to-day.
Tell us about your vet service.
I served in the U.S. Army from 85 to 96, specifically from 90 to 95 in Saudi Arabia during Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
What brought you to this space in your life?
Series of a whole lot of different kind of crap. Been married twice, divorced twice. I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder along with being diabetic, and I've also had bipolar disorder. So it's just a combination of just basically a run of bad luck.
What kind of help are you getting?
Currently, I'm with my current girlfriend. I've been getting a lot of help from George Taylor Sr. and the National Homeless Veteran Support. They've helped me out a lot. They've got me some help that I've needed, and a lot of help I'm still waiting on, but that's due to bureaucratical crap through the VA. But they've helped me out with food, just somebody on the other end of a phone sometimes just to talk to, if I need somebody to talk to. I've met probably a couple hundred veterans down here in Brevard County alone that are just simply hungry. They come here to the Daily Bread, or they'll go to other different food pantries to get food, sometimes clothing, once in a while a good shower. And they'll talk to Miss Beckham, D, as we like to call her, Mom, or the General. She's the coordinator down in this area to help out with the NVHS, to help us vets down here.
What message would you like to give the American public?
Fly your American flag with pride. Support our troops. Even if you don't support the war, support us. There's more of us than what anybody really realizes. That's pretty much it.
Hi, I'm Dee Beckham with National Veterans Homeless Support, and this is how I go to the woods every Wednesday morning and take care of my homeless veterans. I have a variety of things. I have sterno so they can cook. In these 2 containers, I have 5 pounds of food. Donations come in and we go to the Second Harvest Food Bank, and for $200 we can get 210 pounds of food. I give them pillows and pillowcases. Back here is a box of socks. They love socks. Underwear, sheets, toilet paper. The big thing in the woods is toilet paper.
What drew you to helping the vets?
I'm a veteran.
Oh, okay.
I'm a former Marine, and I have a heart for my veterans.
Shouldn't the Commander-in-Chief of the United States be as concerned about what happens to the vets when they came home as you and other vets?
I would think so, yes.
Okay, well, let's go see some of these vets.
Okay.
Let's go in the woods.
All right.
Hey, Camp.
Yeah, I do.
Anybody home? Anybody home?
National Veterans Homeless Support coming in.
Hey. I was in the Army infantry between 1964 and 66. Was stationed overseas. I first learned about the National Veterans Homeless Support Group about almost 2 years ago through the Florida Today. The founder, George Taylor, was on the front page of one edition. He was in the woods and talking to an Iraq wounded veteran that was living in the woods. And it basically touched a chord very deeply. I, being a vet, obviously could empathize. And me, thank God, doing comfortable life now, had a tremendous thing of giving back. I had no idea that these conditions were what we are finding now with it today. And we're finding homeless camps all the time.
He has all his toiletries lined up there. He has his mirror hanging on the tree. He has his own homemade ladder that he goes up and fills up his shower. And then he takes a shower below, and the sun will heat the water because it's dark.
That's really neat.
I mean, they're very, very ingenious. Why have you got a blanket on the roof?
Oh, that's sun protection. It doesn't, it's not a full seam, but certain times you flip it back, you get air, and when the sun's beating on you, you close it back over.
Okay. So,
How long have you been back here?
So just before New Year's. And I don't plan on being here a whole lot longer. As soon as I get some work, I'm out of here.
What kind of work do you do?
I do construction. I'm a saute chef. I paint. I've been doing work for 52 years, so, or 50 years at least.
How many of you are back here?
We got a total of 4 of us. Got Kathy, Steve, Patrick, and me, dog. We're all in hollering distance. Anybody got in trouble, you just yell. And they, we come running. It don't matter if you're in your underwear. 3 o'clock in the morning, somebody yells, you come flying.
I belong to several veteran support groups, American Legion Auxiliary, USA River Rats, and National Veteran Homeless Support, or better known as NVHS. NVHS is the organization that we're working with now that's really taken off in the past, I guess, year and a half, where we're going out into the homeless, finding the homeless camps.
Are you getting support from the local community, from the state, from the city, from...
Not much, no. We have to fight for every little bit of it.
Why?
Because it's not a recognized problem.
NVHS, coming in. Hello. Come to see you.
Hi guys, how are you?
A couple of weeks ago, we had one of our teams go out into the woods, and they came up upon a homeless veteran camp. They hadn't eaten in 3 days. That's pretty sad. It is pretty sad. And the government just does not help. Instead, they give them tickets, they put them in jail, they tag them with different drug addict, alcoholic, and they just clump them into one bunch, and they don't want to deal with it.
I've got another one here.
Literally.
I got this yesterday when I told him of Patrick.
Thank you.
I don't know. When you have these many veterans that live in a homeless thing, that constantly have problems with the VA and the bureaucracy through paperwork and everything else like that, although there's some very good people in the VA that are doing that, then there's a problem. And I think it's just the demand is way beyond their capability to respond. And they don't have the manpower or the budget to respond properly. And I think the nation needs to know this, because it's an absolute shame. It's a disgrace for the men and women who've done this for the country.
Why are you homeless?
Why am I homeless? Well, it starts out
not little at a time. I mean, yeah, it does start out little at a time. Lose your house, lose your car, lose your job. Then what you gonna do? Hey, you know, I don't mind. I don't want anybody to be homeless. Sure enough, I don't. I don't want nobody to be homeless. And I know there's people out there that, oh, sure enough, they lose their house, they lose their job, they lose their car. You know what they do? Put a gun to their head and shoot it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? You can't do that. You gotta keep fighting. You gotta keep fighting. Keep faith.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hey, looky here. You know, I ain't got nothing.
And Patrick is a carpenter.
He a veteran.
And
He a veteran. Living out here in the woods.
One of the things that creates veterans gathering in the woods is if they're with another veteran, they don't really have to address the issues of what their combat give them. We have 1,200 homeless veterans in Brevard County, estimated 4,200 in Central Florida and 17,000 in the state of Florida. I have 5 search and rescue teams that go out daily and we find them in the woods. We give them an avenue of VA. We give them an avenue of housing. We give them an avenue of food. So last year, it was 1,900 different veterans that we actually supported.
I'm executive director for Daily Bread, Inc. The people that come here are people in need. In broad classification, half are homeless and half are not homeless. And when I say broad classification, I mean just that, because everyone has a different story, as you'll probably find out. 13% of all the people that come here are veterans. Roughly 18% of the people that come here work. Many of them a 40-hour week, but the average number of hours worked is about 23 hours a week. I think the average person needs to be more aware. I think they need to be more aware of their neighbor in general. It's not just homeless people that are in need today. There are a lot of people that, because of pride, won't tell you they're in trouble financially, but they are. We have a big problem with debt in this country, and that's probably no secret. We have a problem in people losing their jobs every day. So I think heightening the awareness of the average person that has to help those in need it would be a huge thing.
I came from homelessness. I was the first veteran put in the PTSD program in Miami in 1990. When I came out of the hospital, there was no resources. So it's been my advocacy since '93 to round up our homeless veterans, to give them an avenue of what is available. I deal with 142 veteran organizations in Florida. You know, people want to identify and jump on the president. We got 550 people in Congress. Get them out of office. Give them a term limit. Get them to where they can go in there as an advocate of the issues of their communities that they fought for, and not step into politics and lose the vision that put them there. When the communities stand and believe in what they're saying, and they do a complete about-face once they get into Congress.
Your name's Red.
Yes, that's the
Wonder
nickname.
why.
Yeah.
Red, you're a vet.
I am.
All right. Where'd you serve?
8 years U.S. Army, Fort Hamilton, New York, and 6 years in Germany, Bad Kreuznach.
And you're helping other vets down here.
About a year ago, I found myself a homeless vet and found a facility that kind of helps us out. And
How did you become homeless?
I was diagnosed with PTSD about 10 years ago. A lot of bad episodes kind of wound me to leave relationships, and I left a bad relationship and wound up with no place to go.
What was that like?
Devastating. Made a suicide attempt and
how'd you try to kill yourself?
Decided I would just make a big cocktail, drink it, and hope to not wake up the next day. I've lost a relationship with my kids and family and everything, so I figured that was enough.
How many family do you have?
My father is pretty much it. My mother is an alcoholic, and we don't speak.
So then you ended up on the streets.
I did. I did what we call couch hopping, and I would stay with one friend until you wear out your welcome and try to find another couch.
How many of the vets that you help who are homeless end up becoming either alcoholics or drug addicts or both?
Well, I have 18 people in my facility now, and I would say there's 4 of us that don't attend AA. You know, we're not looking for a handout or anything, and we don't walk around thinking we're owed anything, but it is pretty crappy that we defended this country for these rights, and they talk all they talk, and yet, yeah, I cry almost every day to watch these guys. I bring extra food here that we're scraping by without, but I still bring it, you know? That's who we are. And
you can't
the best we can do is stick together because nobody else is helping us.
You can't spend a day seeing what I've seen, listening to stories, not be angry. The American public are very capable of feeling compassion and empathy, but this is not getting in the media. We're not seeing this story.
No.
What message would you like to give this audience?
It's so frustrating. You know, we've talked our messages. It just seems useless to say anything else. We just seem to stick together and take care of ourselves because that's the way we were trained. You know, I heard somebody else say the VA tries to support us. There's really no support from the VA. If you're homeless, they can provide you with some medical care, but it's usually bare minimal. And the guys are out in the woods, they can forget seeing medical. They don't get the care that they need. What I always say too is, you know, not all homeless vets look homeless. And we're not all alcoholics, and we're not all drug addicts, and we all bust our ass still to get by. And just because we're a little smarter and have a little more ingenuity with how to live in the woods, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. We've just lost a place to go. And all we know is how to fight for this country. Frustrating.
A year ago, I filmed in the woods here. We're right in the middle of a suburban area, and I didn't have food to take them. Today I have a whole bunch of food, a lot, 40 pounds of different foods for these homeless people. So we're going in the woods now, and we're going to talk with the vets and see what has happened in the last year. Are there more, less? How are they doing? As you can see, this is like going into the jungles here. No electricity, no water, poison ivy, poison oak, snakes.
Okay, it's back in here somewhere.
Hello?
Hello?
Totally empty. Last year when I was here, there were dozens of tents, probably 100 people. They're all gone. The police have gotten them out of here, so we'll go to another camp. This is another homeless vets camp, a little better organized than the others around here, right on a main road. And yet you would never know this is here. We're going to go around here. It's getting dark now. The other place we just were, a year ago, there were hundreds of people there, but they were afraid that the police were going to have them thrown out of there because the neighbors didn't want them there. That's what happened. Not a single vet was there. All of this. Last year, people were here. There's someone over here. Hello?
Yeah?
Are you a homeless vet?
Yes.
Well, we brought you a bunch of food.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What happened to all the people who were here?
It's
no
totally
one's there.
cleared out. Cuffs evicted everybody out there.
Are you the only vet back there now?
No.
Could you share some of this with them?
Oh, yeah, I probably need all this. Yeah, we're all buddies, so.
How long have you been homeless?
4th of July, to be honest with you.
Since the 4th of July?
Yeah.
What kind of work do you do?
I'm in the construction.
That business is not going well now.
Nope. No.
If there's a message you'd like to give the American people on behalf of all the other homeless vets you know, what would it be?
Hey, just give them a little respect, you can't judge, a couple bad people for everybody, there are some bums out here, some bum vets. We'll make it.
Good.
And thank you.
Well, we'll get that message out.
Thank you.
We'll be at the stand down tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll be there. I don't know what van I'll catch. I want to catch the earliest one. I don't, Thanks, guys.
Take care.
This is Titusville, Florida, and right now, as you can see, people have been lining up here since before 6 o'clock. We're at the stand down. The stand down is for homeless vets. They're coming from all over this area of the state.
We have 1 million veterans out of work in the United States. 30% of these veterans are Iraq, Afghan, 4% women. These are not your chronic homeless veterans. These are young veterans coming home who sign that dotted line when they come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. They lose their income. Their spouse and children have no income after that. And they're 22, 23 years old. They just want a job.
The problem of our homeless veteran situation has just really escalated. We try to get them into housing, but there's not enough housing. They're not getting the care that they need. And now we have our new veterans coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're coming home to no jobs, they're coming home to no pay, no homes, and they're out in the woods.
They're coming back to a place where they have no jobs, and that's why they end up where they do.
Veterans in general, the number we see have increased. Many of them are hardworking people, usually tied to the trades, plumbers, electrical workers, or people tied to the construction industry. And of course, that whole industry is down on its back.
I was a roofer. I've been roofing and ceramic tile. I've been in construction all my life. Quit school. The economy got bad. Didn't have no work, nowhere to go. I lived underneath the old Max Brewer Causeway Bridge for a couple years. Never panhandled, never asked nobody for nothing. And people used to come, believe it or not, and leave bags of groceries and everything for me. But now the bridge is gone, and it's hard to go places. The police are breaking up the camps everywhere. Nowhere to set up a tent. I go from place to place. I float. It's miserable. It's miserable, but it is what it is, and I can't do anything about that.
When I came back from Vietnam, I could get a job, easy to get a job. And if I didn't like the job I have, I could walk 2 blocks up the road and get another job. The jobs were plentiful. They aren't now.
Not everybody that's homeless is there by any sort of choice. There are a lot of people that, like in my case, were just 1 paycheck away from losing their place, and when they lost their job, they lost their place, and it's hard to get back up there. So please keep that in mind when, oh, that's another drunken bum. No, that's not everybody.
Got out of the military. At one point I had 3 jobs and still had no electricity. And it got to a ridiculous point. Couldn't even find work after a while. Can't really stay with your family for too long.
I was actually in a tent in the woods over all of last winter, and then kind of staying wherever I could for a while before I got in the facility.
It's ridiculously difficult. Like at first, you can only hope to ever have like a small tent at first, or if you have a shelter. Most of the time, you really don't have somewhere safe to go. And it's not like society just will let you, camp out somewhere. So it always has to be hidden, and you got to think about your security.
What's it been like getting support during that time when you were homeless, as far as getting food and shelter and that?
Well, you can sometimes find meals. There were times I went dumpster diving, if you've heard the term. You just do what you have to do. You have to eat, so.
Because I didn't have an address, I couldn't even get food stamps. So I was like stealing fruit from people's gardens and stuff to survive. And the crazy thing about it was just survival. People don't have an idea what survival is like anymore.
Everywhere you go now, you got homeless vets and homeless people.
And homeless people, right.
The difference is the vets are a little more organized and that they know how to survive.
Oh, yes, they have excellent survival skills. They shouldn't have to use them once they're back on American soil, but they do. They survive.
It's very lonely. Much of the time, they say, like psychoanalysts and psychodynamists will say, that solitude is the greatest fear a human being could ever know. And while it's great, looking death in the face is a lot worse and kind of fixes that problem.
The common thread that runs through homelessness that I've seen over the years is depression. And depression is, it's not something, the military culture doesn't really acknowledge it, maybe more so nowadays. But depression can be debilitating, as you well know. And when I see that, what I try to do is I try to instill a modicum of hope, of, well, not all is lost, and maybe I've lost all my material possessions, but I still have who I am and what I have to offer. And many people don't understand that. When they interact with somebody who is less fortunate than them, they look at them in our culture as less fortunate than me. And we're a me culture.
It's the same as a homeless dog, or a stray dog, as you would say. I saw one the other day and I realized it had a lot in common with me. People treat it poorly because they assume that it's a horrible mongrel. It's dirty, it's not showered, it's lonely, so it always wants to, when it sees somebody, it wants to be near them and it wants to play, and they don't really understand that. And the homeless person is always cast down upon, no matter what he's doing or striving to achieve. There's like opposition at every corner, and I wish people would be more understanding with each other. It's not just about the homeless problem, it's just a people problem. There's just not enough understanding.
I've got nowhere. I've got no job. I've got no income. I get my little food stamps. I don't get SSI or SSD or anything. I'm perfectly healthy. I do have a problem. I was with my girl for a couple years, and we tried to get into an apartment on her SSI, SSD, and with her income, she doesn't make enough, and with both of us together, I'm denied because of my criminal record. I have a bad background. My background hurts me everywhere that I go. I can't go nowhere. I can't get into an apartment. I'm lost, man. That's all. I'm lost, but I'm happy. I go to church every Sunday. I'm blessed. I don't go to jail anymore. I try to do the right thing, which is good,
What got you into trouble?
Driving on suspended licenses. I quit driving, and then I got tickets for riding my bicycle with no headlight. I got a ticket for walking down the street where sidewalks are accessible. It's miserable. This is a bad place. I mean, this is a bad place for a young person or a homeless person. It's like if you're homeless, you're nothing. You're a POS, piece of shit, as they call it, and it's terrible. And I'm just trying to live and get by day to day. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
Well, thank you. Y'all have a good day, and God bless you.
How often do you hear these reports of the police harassing the vets?
Weekly, and
So
it just
it's a
seems to be
common
getting
problem.
worse. Yes, absolutely.
Because it was bad a year ago when I was down here.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten worse. It's definitely gotten worse since then.
And we live in a society, as you probably are aware, that disposes of our nuisances, of our adolescents who act out, or our elderly, and our veterans who are homeless. And they tend to have them. The most common self-descriptor I have from veterans over the years, in the 3 decades that I've been working with homeless veterans, or homeless in general, is I'm invisible.
So therefore, these folks are out there trying to struggle to get by, and yes, it's going to get worse. And the new veterans are different than the old veterans. We haven't got a full handle on them, and we got the female veterans that I don't think the VA is equipped to deal with them quite yet, and I know we're not equipped to deal with them. We'll try the best we can.
We have 1 million veterans backlog in veterans benefits in Washington, D.C. So when we find a veteran and we plug him in through service office, it is 12 to 14 months to get him a basic opening of his claim where he might get partial compensation. So we have to maintain that veteran for that 12 months or that 14 months till he gets an income if he's entitled to service connection disability.
They need jobs, they need housing, they need education.
Their scars are not always visible, but they are trying. They're trying their best.
Especially returning vets, because they're trying to transition back into society and they are having a very difficult time finding work. The unemployment rate's actually higher for Iraq, Afghanistan vets than the general population, which is already very high. And you know, the adjustment issues that come along with that, trying to get their benefits established, things like that, it definitely poses a problem.
In the years that I've been working with homeless, and particularly here on the Space Coast of Florida, I've literally pulled rocket scientists out of the woods, and people who have met with a modicum of not a fair amount of success in their lives have fallen into homelessness.
Right now, I'm seeing an awful lot of families that never thought they would be homeless. They had good jobs, engineers, salespeople, things that had good, secure jobs, now are finding they are homeless. Fathers, mothers, children. And I have engineers that are flipping burgers now. They want anything.
One of the major difficulties that we're looking at here in Florida is almost all of the National Guard and Reserves have been called back to active duty. And they have spent time in Iraq or Afghanistan. Well, when they were called to active duty, the employer by law was required to hold their position for X number of days. What happened was a lot of these people were extended beyond the 6 months. And as a result of that, when they came back, they no longer had a job, or their business had gone belly up. Those are the people I'm seeing almost daily come here looking for help.
We facilitate in this county 2 annual homeless veteran stand-downs. And essentially what we do is we bring homeless veterans in for a day of services, and a wide range of services, medical, healthcare, food, and we treat them like royalty. And it's a philosophy. It's not an operation. I mean, when I was a Marine in Vietnam, I was pulled back for a stand down for 3 days, and they gave me a haircut and new boots and new uniforms and sort of a respite from the storm. This is an opportunity to afford them the fundamental respect that they earned in the military.
What we have here in this area is there are different buildings that are offering sleeping bags, canteens, brand new boots. Behind me are clothing that has been donated. And what's really neat is this is all so well organized. We're over here at the medical tent, and I was just going to interview some of the physicians and chiropractors. And I met this gentleman. This is Lance Armstrong. This is a special guy. Well, what are the most common conditions you're going to be helping with today?
Degenerative disc and spine joint disease, radiculopathy. They are being screened today for diabetes, blood work, and that sort of thing. They have hygiene here, showers here. They receive food here.
A lot of these men and women live in the woods, and you know what kind of sleeping conditions that is. That's going to adversely affect their neck, their back.
No question. Not to mention, last year I think I had approximately 10 out of about 70 I treated that had been recently beaten. I've been doing it about 15, 16 years, and this is a great way to help others and get a lot of benefit from it as well.
There's organizations inside to help you also, with things that you need, whether it be legal services or food stamps or whatever that may be. It's here.
We provide legal assistance to low-income residents. When people are laid off and they apply for unemployment compensation benefits and they're denied, our public benefits attorneys step in and assist them with their appeal. Foreclosure has jumped tremendously in the past probably 2 or 3 years.
We have organizations helping us to help ourselves get off the streets and get back into society and be helpful. I came out here to volunteer today so that I can give back what was so freely given to me. And that's my turn to give back.
When you're a veteran, you're part of a family. People who are not veterans don't understand that. There's a common bond that we all share. Every one of us at one time in our life had promised to sacrifice our life if necessary for our country. And it's very easy to get veterans to help other veterans, especially when they're in need. We don't like to see our brothers hurting.
If you look at them, you can see it right in their eyes, the PTSD, the trauma that they've been through. They will say, I can't talk to you about it because you could never understand what I've seen and what I've been through. These kids are coming back without limbs, and they're just not getting the care that they need, not in the timely manner. And the VA claims it's taken 18 months to process a VA claim. And these kids, men, they're out in the woods, and women, they're out in the woods with families, and they have nowhere to go.
It kind of sickens me a little bit. These people have gone out and served their country. They may have served it during Cold War, they may have served it during a wartime in combat, and they come back here and they got problems. And for years, our government never really recognized these problems.
In some cases, I have seen people that needed years to get their all their veterans affairs in order and things with all the paperwork. And
so you pick up whatever you could pick up for a job. If you have to cut a lawn or trim bushes or paint, whatever, but you can barely even find that sometimes.
And a lot of them are willing to take jobs that are not very good. I mean, dishwashers. If they can make $150 a week and it helps them to get through and put a roof over their head, put food in their stomach.
Are you living in the woods now?
Yes, ma'am. We got a camp. There's 3 guys. We had 6, now we're down to 3 of us. But we all get along. It's a decent place. Like I say, everybody's got their own, we call them condos, but they're 7 by 9 foot tents.
What would you say would be one of the most challenging things of living in the woods?
Hygiene. I mean, it's not so bad for us because we got a lake right in front of us. You can jump in the water.
Gators.
There's a big one out there too. He's got to be twice as long as I am tall.
Oh, wow.
So you don't swim in the water a whole bunch. You might get in and get wet and clean up, but you don't stay in the water a whole bunch around there.
A lot of people kind of look away from the homeless. They don't.
Well, yeah, you get a lot of people look at you and look down at you all the time. And what they don't stop to realize is sometimes things just happen. And sometimes it's bad choices and this and that and the other. But sometimes it just, especially with the economy like it is, some of the guys that don't draw a pension and can't find work, you can't buy a job right now out in Titusville.
With the homeless population growing as it is, it's hard to find places to sleep where you're not bothered by the police and you're not bothering anybody, to be out of the way. And when that realization finally hits you and you don't know where you're going to go anymore.
People who have no place else to go. Almost all of them were employed at one time and in the military, and now they don't have a job. So they go where at least they feel they'll be protected, be around people they can share something in common with, who've had common experience as other vets. And they told us last year, 12 months ago, that the neighbors didn't want them, the community didn't want them, and the police didn't want them. They were getting hassled a lot. Now I'm hearing that they're also closing down a lot of the little encampments here. My question was, if someone's poor, if someone's homeless, if someone has no money, if someone has nothing going for them in that moment, why would you go in there and make life more difficult for them? What in the world is the point of hurting a person, displacing a person that has no place else to go? I don't understand that. The mayor's here, and we're going to ask the mayor that because I would like to know what the mayor did to stop that, or was he a part of it?
I just went to a camp yesterday in the woods. They're all gone because they were told they were forced out. And more in the woods, they're being forced out. So my question is, what can you do as a mayor, at least in your area, to see that those people are not forced out, that so they can get back up on their feet? Because everyone I speak to, everyone says they need a job, they're looking for work, they're having a hard time. Almost all of them at one time had families and houses, gainfully employed, but they're not now. Your thoughts?
Well, obviously, these are very difficult issues, and if they weren't difficult, we'd have it all solved by now, wouldn't we? I mean, even the people that are working are experiencing difficulties with financially, so trying to find the money, and lots of it comes down to money. Now, we have from time to time forced people off of private property. And we have here in Titusville, I can't speak to Orlando. I don't know the situation over there. We have, from time to time, forced people off of private property because they are trespassing. And as much as you want to feel for these people who are down on the luck, they do have to have permission to be residing on private property, and sometimes the property owner doesn't want them there. And sometimes they're forced off because of safety issues. When we have anti-camping ordinances in our city, and when people are lighting fires in the woods, you have to understand that this part of Florida, probably more of Florida, is very, very prone to wildfires, especially in certain times of the year when we get a little drier. And when people are building fires in the woods, they create safety problems, and our fire department is very concerned about that. So what everyone has to realize is there's always two sides to every story. We certainly all want to be as compassionate as we possibly can. We don't want people having to live in the woods, and we have to try and, as best we can, to find the resources to help them out of those kinds of situations. But we also have to be cognizant of the people who own the properties. We have to be cognizant of safety issues. We have to be cognizant of people who are unfortunately have drug and alcohol problems and are creating panhandling and creating problems for citizens. So we have to weigh both sides of these issues and try to find a solution. And like I said, if it were easy, we'd have it all solved by now.
The last day of the shuttle, I was out of town, and I came home, and 7 or 8 public works, 4 people from the police department, a backhoe, a pickup truck, code enforcement, and fire department went into these camps. They did not want them visible for the last day of the shuttle. I informed the mayor, if you destroy their camps, you put them in the public. Second of all, they destroyed their tools, they destroyed their belongings, they destroyed everything the community had been giving them to give them their basic needs while they're homeless. The veteran, the only chance he had in one camp, he was a welder by trade. He had tanks, and he says he had all kind of welding stuff. They destroyed it. They destroyed, one gentleman was a tree climber, his chainsaws, his rope climbing, all the stuff he does for his work. They destroyed it.
The Titusville Police Department went in and trashed 11 of our camps. They went in with bulldozers and took down their tents, took their personal belongings, and displaced them. Some of them, they ran their names, whatever, and they arrested them. They had their tools that they used for trade. That's how they would make, somewhat of a living. And their tools were trashed. They were thrown in the garbage. One of our veterans, he flew the flag that covered his father's coffin over his camp every day. They took that flag down and they threw it in the trash. They threw out all of their personal belongings, and these guys had absolutely nothing. And within a couple of days, we had that cold spell and we had the rain, and we found them laying on park benches with just their T-shirt, all huddled up in the rain, sleeping. And this is how the police department left them.
Totally 100% illegal. Search and seizure. That is their property. The proper way to have a problem with the camp is inventory that individual stuff, as you would in somebody else's case. Take possession of it. When they get out of jail, they have a right to retrieve their personal belongings. They have no right to destroy the personal belongings without due process. None whatsoever. So I'm still upset about it.
I just had a woman come up and state that you were responsible for bulldozing an entire tent city, confiscating everything. She said that that you were the one that had initiated that. Is that true?
Well, our city did that,
And I did not know about it in advance. In fact, even our city manager didn't know about it in advance. But what we were told, what we were told by the police department was that it was on private property. The private property owner did not want them there. The police department went in at least 3 times to warn everyone that they needed to move to a different location. And they did their utmost best to make sure everyone knew that they were trespassing.
Who initiated the bulldozers, though?
Well, I don't know that it was bulldozers.
I've had 2 people say it now, that there was bulldozers. They literally wiped out everything. You know, people were left there with no IDs, nothing. And they're kind of pointing the finger at
our city?
At you.
Well, so like I said, there's always 2 sides to every story. You should go interview the police chief and get the details from their side of the
Mayor, thank you for your
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
The mayor told me that they had been warned on 3 separate occasions they had to relocate or their camp was going to be torn down.
They were informed of 2 things, that they could go to Salvation Army if they had to leave their camp. Salvation Army allows you 3 days per year for an individual. Some of these veterans had already had their 3 days through a hurricane or through wintertime. We have no shelter. We have no place for them to go. So even though a couple of them may have been asked and several of them were not asked, that they could go to the Salvation Army. Where is the conversation that somebody said, hey, we're going to take these camps out? It's sad, Mayor. It's real sad. Is that a violation of the Sunshine Law? We ordered 6 months of electronics. There isn't.
When you mean public records?
Public records. There isn't a single conversation in 6 months that this is going to happen. There's not a single conversation in 6 months at the police department that this is going to happen. I have a hard time believing that on a given day, 4 city police, 8 public works, with a backhoe, a pickup, with a vehicle. Code enforcement Mike walked away, wouldn't have nothing to do with it. And no conversation, and they removed and destroyed everything they had. Where's the conversation? I mean, wouldn't somebody give the order? I mean, wouldn't somebody say, hey, we don't want them visible? I don't know. I don't know, Mayor. I wish you would find out. I'm not allowed to talk to you.
Yes, you are.
I called and made an appointment with your secretary.
You can talk to me.
And she called me and told me that I could not have a conversation with you and canceled my appointment.
That's not true.
I was trying to address this.
In fact, you know, I've been meaning to get in touch with you. The last time we had this conversation, I wanted to go out on one of your field trips and go out and walk around the woods with
Mayor,
you. And then you got sick for a while.
Well, but you asked me, so I went in and made an appointment with your secretary. That was on a Monday morning, and then I was informed at 2 o'clock that I can have a conversation with you.
That must have been
and I said, you know what? I said,
because I'm available to talk to any citizen.
The mayor, I knew that's what I thought too. The veteran who comes home because of economic times and there's no work should not surrender his rights because he ends up homeless. It is not illegal to be homeless. Some of our city officials that get elected don't want them to be seen. You know, by them being seen, we can plug them into the VA. We can plug them into the services in our community, and we decrease those numbers by having them at a place where we can work with them for the stuff that they don't know about the VA. So these police departments that are doing that and the city ordinances, they're 100% wrong. Veterans who fought for this country should not sign that paper coming back from the youngest wars right now is Iraq and Afghanistan and surrender their rights after they just fought for our freedom. It's wrong, and it's happening daily.
So you're living in the woods now. How long have you been homeless?
Losing count. 6 years, 7 years.
What would you say would be most challenging about being homeless?
For me or for others? Find a place to stay without being bothered.
We go to the Daily Bread once a week, and we're intaking 15 new. We're averaging 15 new veterans a week.
You know, there's actually even children that are homeless in our woods with their family, with their parents.
Really?
Yes.
How old are they?
So, they're grade school children. There's no discrimination on poverty. It's, you know, it's hitting everybody.
Did you ever think growing up that we would get to this point?
No. In fact, until I started dealing with NVHS and these veterans, I didn't realize there was as many people that were in trouble as there are now.
I had a couple, I met them on Tuesday at the Daily Bread where we had been the last time I met them, and I was getting them into housing on Thursday. They went back into the woods to their camp. The police caught him, trespassed him, put him in jail. He lost his housing. The wife, who, as she said 2 years ago, was a quote-unquote soccer mom, I found her wandering the streets just crying and crying because she had nowhere to go. And they took him and he was clean cut. I had no idea that he was a homeless veteran, but they just, no questions asked, they just took him and locked him up.
And his crime was what?
His crime was he was in his camp. He was in his camp, and they trespassed him.
But those police could just as easily have gone into that camp where this man and wife were doing nothing wrong.
Nothing wrong.
And say, just leave.
Right. No, they arrested him.
If a veteran in Sanford sits on a bench in the public in front of a business, he will be arrested. If a veteran, homeless person goes into one of our parks and somebody doesn't like the way he looks, he will be trespassed or arrested. They have no rights when they're homeless.
I've been trespassed for sitting in the park. Public park, how could you be trespassed
You
from
were
a public?
trespassed for sitting in the park?
Yeah, in the Veterans Park of all places.
Wow.
I was only there maybe 2 minutes. I didn't even get a chance to sit down. He pulled in and says, "You're trespassers." What? I said, "In the Veterans Park and I'm a veteran. I can't be here." He says, "My boss is out." So.
What city was this in?
Right here in Titusville.
Titusville.
You and I have the right, because we pay taxes, to sit on a bench. These people that fought for our country, who the freedom that we share was paid by their ultimate price, and if they end up homeless, they lose those rights. They don't have a right to sit on a bench.
Have you heard of other vets being hassled for being poor and sitting in a public park?
Oh, yeah. People out to enjoy a park overall. I could understand if they're doing something wrong. They shouldn't be drinking in the park or anything like that. But, if you're just reading a book.
We went over last year to Lake Eola in Orlando, which is a downtown, and it's very popular for the homeless. We took, with the help of George, between George and I together, blankets and sleeping bags and winter clothes and coats and things like that because it was cold. And then there was another church ministry that would come over there and feed them, hot meal, cooked. Well, it is now illegal for that church to do that. They will take them to jail if we're caught over there assisting the homeless.
Run that by me again. My mind's not wrapping around what you just said.
Yes.
You're saying that you can go to jail, you'll be arrested for helping give a hot meal to a homeless person?
Absolutely.
It was food, not bombs. And they were feeding them at Lake Eola. And the people at the park didn't want them feeding at the park. So they were arresting them. If you were feeding them, you have to have a permit to feed the homeless, and you're only allowed 2.
They're not bothering anyone. They're sitting down eating. Everything is cleaned up when they leave, so it's not like they're leaving a mess in the park. So it is beyond me why, we cannot go down there. We're not asking any money from the city. Go, and we do this. Everybody's behaved, cleaned up, but no, now you cannot do it.
If a person's down on their luck, if a family has children and they have no food and the children are going hungry and a church wants to feed them some food, how could anyone make that a crime and arrest the people wanting to feed them?
Wrong people elected in office. That's why.
I live in a world of what ifs, so I don't have the luxury of planning something out definitely. Every day is something new. Just trying to succeed, really, is the next step.
And our economy has got to start looking out for these guys. They've given up family, friends, education, and we turn our back on them. There should be no such thing as a homeless veteran.
Then what if you did what you do all over the world right now? You put up a real military tent city.
I have a military tent for medical today at our stand-down. I could put 25 veterans in that same tent. It was fine for us in combat. It was fine for us fighting for this country. Why is it not suitable for a soft shell community now so we can transition these veterans back to a better place.
I would like the average, more affluent American, the 70 million Americans who are not suffering, I wish they could spend a day here and see all this, to speak with these vets, to speak with people who tonight are going to take their sleeping bag and their canteen, the clothes are getting over here off this rack, and take it back to a tent.
And it's going to get down in the 40s tonight.
And then ask those people, knowing that the community doesn't want you there, the police don't want you there, that you're probably only going to be there for a short period of time until they come in there and throw you out, what your future looks like.
You know what's amazing to me? With the billions of dollars we put into Veterans Affairs, I would like to know, if you take off the fraud and you take off the administrative and you take off the soft jobs, how much money is actually going to service to our veterans? You know, it looks good in Washington, D.C. when you throw billions and billions of dollars in Veterans Affairs. And I've got a veteran that walks into one of our clinics. He doesn't have transportation because you have to go to Tampa for TBI testing. So he has no way to get to Tampa for that test. He can't file for his benefits because of that test. Our Veterans Affairs in Florida has a long ways to go. And the fraud in our wars could definitely sustain our veterans in our country.
There's an equation in life. It's validation and non-validation. Everyone enjoys validation. Everyone feels a sense of failure when they're not validated, when they're not talked to. And so that's the essence of turning around homeless recovery on the micro version. On the macro version, yes, we need more funding, we need more ancillary services, but that validation, that talking to somebody, that looking them in the eye and saying, you are a real person and you deserve to be here.
We've been filming here for 7 hours, and I'm off now to the airport on to our next city. This has been an extremely emotional experience. You really feel for the vets, and so many questions about why do they need to suffer this way. My hope is that when people who are advocates of the vet going into war or combat become the same strong advocates when they get out of combat. If Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, Laura Ingraham, if they were as strong in saying that this problem of homelessness, the abuse of the vets, a vet getting a ticket and told to get out of a veterans park, person's only going in to sit down to read a book. Vets being put in jail, and the only crime they've committed is that they're poor and they're a veteran. We could do a lot better than that.